We, as a district, we have a history of trying to be 2 years out with our school calendar so that our families and our staff can plan ahead for vacations and things of that nature. So I'm excited tonight to present you the 2020-2021 school year calendar. This calendar, go ahead, Vicki. This calendar is very similar to the calendar we are currently living now and the 1920 school calendar that the board approved last year. There are some minor changes in the calendar that's required each year as the days of the week fall differently or the holidays fall differently, so we've made some of those minor adjustments. For the last 2 years, an information sheet has been provided with the calendar survey to kind of help the community understand all the parameters that are considered that really restrict us in creating our calendar. And that full information sheet is available on Board Docs for our community to see there. And a sample of that information is here on the slide. So we look at things like the start and end date of the school year, the length of the breaks, the lengths of the quarters and semesters, the start date for students, snow makeup days, graduation dates, just lots of different parameters that go into kind of holding us to the system that we have. So when we first create this calendar, we really do try to meet as many of those parameters as possible. And we did that with a draft of the calendar that went out with the survey. And then as the staff and the community provide input through that survey, they share their thoughts and opinions of what things should be changed or tweaked. Sometimes those changes will mean that we will not meet one of the parameters, and that's definitely the case with this calendar as we move forward. And we'll talk about those changes. Big ideas in the 2020-21 calendar. Returning teachers will not come back until August 3rd. Our students will return on a Monday, and that will be August 10th, and that's due to some of those changes that we'll talk about that our stakeholders have shared because of the Christmas break on that first calendar. And then the length of each break is consistent with what we've done in the past. So spring break and fall break are the same, and Christmas break, the same number of days that our families and our staff are used to. And again, we've added those snow days at the end of the year. Our calendar has really not changed significantly in the last several years. This is the 10th year that will start with a similar date, and the length of the breaks is consistent with our tradition. Most times in the survey, the comments are, I either love fall break, it's stupendous, or I don't like it at all. And that most families know that the start of that day is because of that fall break, and it kind of pushes our start date up a little bit earlier than what some other school districts will do. So we try to compare our start date with others, and this is the start date from each district in the area, our benchmark districts as well, and where they started school in the 2018-2019 school year. Again, about a week earlier than what our proposed start date is for 2021. And again, it is that fall break that kind of pushes that start date back a little bit. So with our survey, this year we saw a stronger response in the dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. And I do believe that that was mostly because of where Christmas break started in that original draft. So we had students coming a half day on December 23rd, and families and staff felt like that was just too close to Christmas. And really, most comments asked that Friday the 18th was the last day of the first semester so that we could have a little more time before the holidays began for travel, as well as just preparing for the holidays. So I think that really was the difference in our survey comments. But still, overall, close to 50% of those that took the survey still responded either satisfied, very dissatisfied, or satisfied, very satisfied, or neutral to the calendar. So other than that Christmas comment, I think for the most part they're happy with the calendar as it was provided. So the comments in the survey, and you do have those on Board Docs as well. You can read through the hundreds of responses and see the individual comments, but for the most part, our staff members were concerned about the placement of our elementary early release days, the start of Christmas break, and then coming back to work on Easter Monday because that Tuesday was election day. And so we'll talk about the changes that we made based on staff input because of that. And then for our community, patrons took the survey as well. And their overall themes, as always, fall break and the start of school, that continues to be part of their comments. Elementary early release and Christmas break. It was a little interesting to see the elementary release day comments here, but 30% or so of those that participated in the community survey were also employees. So I think we see some crossover between the two surveys when it's taken. So changes that we made. The original calendar had us working 84 days in first semester, 85 in second. And because of the changes that were requested, we will have a little bit of a more uneven semester, so we'll have 83 and 86. We pushed the first day back with students, so they will start on Monday, August 10th. We moved the elementary early release days from October 9th to October 2nd, and from March 12th to March 5th. That gives all of our elementary teachers that week to prepare for parent-teacher conferences and get their records ready before they have their breaks. And then Christmas break, we did push that back, so Friday the 18th will be the last day with students, and then Monday the 21st will be the start of Christmas break. So that was, I think our patrons and our staff will be appreciative of that. We are ending Christmas break two days earlier, and we did eliminate one day for students in that break so that we could change that day after Easter. So our families and staff typically have Good Friday off. Then there's the Easter Sunday. The original calendar had them coming back on Monday and then having Election Tuesday off. And so now they'll have that full break. So we don't have that odd day. I think staff was worried about attendance of students and families just wanting to extend that, which did make sense. So those were the big changes in the calendar. I do think that having students start on a Monday, we'll hear a little bit about that. That's not typical for us in the last few years, but hopefully seeing that Christmas break will start a little bit early will relieve some of that tension. And I'll be happy to take any questions that you have about the calendar.
Board, any questions? Ms. Simpkins, I would like to thank you and the folks that helped you with this calendar. I know it's always a hot topic with our families and our staff, and so I know it's hard to find a good balance. And I think, again, you guys have done a good job at trying to find the best possible answer. There's no amazing answer, so I think you've come to a really good solution though. So thank you very much. Anything else, board?
No, they fixed everything.
Yeah.
There's not really much
Yeah.
to-
They fixed all the
Well,
problems.
I think it's important. It's a great example that we really do listen to the input of our staff and our community. When we send out those surveys, we do take those to heart and really look at wanting to make sure that they're happy with the calendar. It's their work calendar. It's their family calendar that is affected. So just want to be sure that we take those things into account. I do think we'll hear a little bit about the start of the school year, but it allows us to have some Christmas time in there. So we'll bring this back for you to vote on in December.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So now we have to wait till 7.
Yeah, you gotta wait till 7.
Yes. So board, our regular meeting will start at 7 p.m. I'll meet you on the dais.
Okay, thank you.
All of us?
She does babies in the line. Katie's got a new job, so her and John. That was hard. They're Monday, Thursday. She's like, oh my God. She her job description. Oh, sure. She's working now at some cardiology as a receptionist / something else. And she's working 4 days a week, 10-hour days. And so she's and they decided that rather than both of them being out there all the time, John goes out there every morning and comes over there and get lunch and get the kids down and then
We like PG on a Friday, not on a Monday, and trying to make everyone
she's doing
happy.
good. John just turned 70.
But if we stick with the same system, if you're unhappy with this system,
Right, came into town last week.
I got a snow day.
It's your birthday today.
I got a snow day. Thank you.
Aw.
She's going to get some pledge allegiance.
Oh, there's cool.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I really am. I do. All right, thank you.
It seems like we just slapped it. You're 16 months pregnant. Just slide it somewhere. I would hope. That's a good point.
Yes, I did. I did cross over. I clicked on scoreboard. Okay. Oh, she's right. Okay. Okay. Oh. Okay. Okay. I know. Because I was.
You'll be fine. I thought the exact same thing. Go figure.
All good.
Yes, everything happened for a reason. That is true. I should have made it clean.
Kevin got home from this right
Yeah, yeah.
paper.
top three things I'm talking about tonight?
Yeah, I think I'm doing my best. I'm guessing.
Okay.
Chicken scratch.
Pretty good.
Love it. I haven't talked to you guys yet. Something we're trying tonight is I can't do
I asked this on one today that said it's snowing in November because people have already decorated fires.
Oh, I saw that Facebook post.
That was cute.
You know what that's called?
Yeah, you're right, right.
It's March.
I don't think I have tea time. I was have like my whole life in kindergarten or high school. I don't think I realized what my parents was tonight. The conception was Mary.
Interesting. That was a challenge.
I guess so. Oh, it was so sad. I watched Jeff. His team was in
I know I've heard it. I just don't know who said it though. So you tell me, and I'm like, oh,
Mary, you don't need to copy that.
saying like memory. And you're good.
They're working on my computer system.
I don't know if you had anything. Did you see the other thing I sent
I just got one. I didn't know I had one on.
you? Show that up tomorrow. I found that picture. No, I didn't put the logo on too. That's next level stuff.
And Jason can go do virtual meetings. The only problem was that they're going to use the
So then could watch it? Oh,
It would have to.
yeah, to be like
Yeah, we'll take their pictures down. Or July.
You stress me
You
out.
guys all kinds of gifts. I would say. Yeah, Cindy, and she was like, yeah.
use this link.
We're gonna try it for tonight. When I got there, I can download one app. I was like,
You're there? Yes, and then it's coming to, and maybe that's how it evolves. Down there, yeah.
I lived in country.
Yeah.
I was still down south when I said.
I have the two
I have one in the
Yeah, that's it. Or you went out after work, or somebody, yes.
So you'd be ready to go at 3:30? Get like a little joy buzzing or this No, I appreciate it. Big red on Get big
It's gonna be my fault sometime. It was.
All right, if we're ready, it is 7 p.m. and I will call the Francis Howell School District Board of Education meeting to order. We will begin with our Pledge of Allegiance, led by Vicki Frame, the birthday girl.
Yay! I love being here with her.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vicki. Happy birthday. All right, Board, as you know, we are here on a snow day, so we did shorten our agenda. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mrs. Lang. By roll call.
Ms. Walker?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Next on our agenda is patron comments. So I'd like to remind everyone that during patron comments, we invite our patrons up to address the Board of Education. Please come to the podium so everyone can hear. Please adhere to the 3-minute time limit. The board is interested in hearing the public's concerns and opinions, but we do not answer patron questions during our meeting. Questions and concerns will be addressed by Dr. Mary Hendricks Harris and the appropriate staff members. Please remember that comments about individual students and staff are not allowed due to confidentiality. These concerns need to be brought to the administration's attention and may be brought to the board in a closed session. So with that, we will begin with Steve Jones.
Good evening, board, everybody. My name's Steve Jones. I've been with First Student. I've been a manager there for 20 years. A lot of my folks are here tonight. We wanted to say a few words. The district contracts with First School administrators can focus their energy and resources on the core function of education. It puts necessary resources and time back in the classroom, assuring that students' transportation is managed by an industry-leading expert. Last year, the Francis Howell School District commissioned a transportation analysis to examine the efficiency of our operations. The overall conclusion of school bus consultants was that transportation services for the districts are being provided in a manner that is both cost-effective and service efficient. Our location operation is performing well and poised for continuous improvement. In reviewing our customer satisfaction scores from last year, Francis Howell awarded 9 out of 10. On our annual survey, our safety, maintenance, technology, recruiting, training, and focus on best practices are unmatched in the industry. If the district is willing to invest $16 million of new capital to reduce operating expenses for free operating dollars to invest in education, there's a better path we would like to explore. It is one that we operate under in several locations across the country. If you purchase a new fleet as planned with your potential insourcing First Student would be able to operate and maintain it at prices approximately 18% under our base bid from the RFP and 12% from current pricing. The savings represents $10 million over 5 years of the term and $2 million for the first year. In conclusion, we value the relationship we have built with the district and community over the years. We are aware that this evening the board will be presented with a recommendation to insource bus transportation for next year. We respectfully ask that you defer this decision tonight and sit down with First Student to discuss options that best meet the needs of the district. We are committed to working with you and at that end. This would not only best serve the district's students and taxpayers' needs, but also remove the significant risks you're considering undertaking in startup and new operations, as well as continues to give you the benefits and control that First Student provides today. Thank you for your time, board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Crystal Long.
Good evening. Hello, I have been with First Student for about 15 years as a driver, dispatcher, and now router. Our FP response calls for bringing in 98 new buses. The buses will be equipped with the latest technology. We recently introduced First View for the Francis Howell and went to introduce the First View parent app as well. Families can better manage where our buses are and the parents can follow through as well. First Planning Solutions is a team of routing experts. FPS will remain a phone call away just to the district. Our maintenance program. Our Francis Howell location achieved a 90% on the annual Missouri State Highway Patrol inspection. We did receive a new tech, and his name is Jeff, and he has done a wonderful job since he's been hired on. First Student has invested significant resources in recruiting, training, and retaining our drivers and monitors. They are valued employees and we work hard to maintain positive relationships. Any transition in employment of this kind will inevitably be disruptive, cause anxiety, and may lead to attrition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jennifer Dershowitz.
Thank you, an excellent job on the last name. Usually nobody gets it right. All right, I just want to say I'm here on behalf of my fellow bus drivers. I wanted to say that we are a dedicated group of individuals that care deeply for the children in this district. Some of us have faithfully driven for Francis House School District since 1970. Ooh, sorry. Please consider our passion and dedication to the children as the district and us move forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sherry Beeler.
Good evening. My name is Sherry. I've been driving for over 20 years. Now I'm dispatching. First Student values our strong partnership with the Francis House School District. We have been proud to serve the community for the past 19 years, and we would like to continue to provide your students with safe transportation, which is why we provide the district with a robust RFP response. We are also the lowest option, $1.2 million less than the nearest competitor over the next 5 years. Going to a self-operated system does not mean more control. We firmly believe that having a strong vendor, a solid contact, and technology that offers full visibility provides any district with the maximum control over the service that is delivered. We convert districts every year to contracted services for this reason and rarely see districts move back in-house. First Student did review the timeline presented to the school board to bring transportation in-house. The district will have to issue more than 10 separate RFPs to acquire the services First Student already packages and provides. The district will also have to negotiate a new labor contract with the drivers. First Student's current contract with Teamsters Local 610 is secured for the next 4 years and does not expire until 2023. The district will also have to hire a staff to manage the operation, which includes management, staff, maintenance, and more than 200 drivers and monitors. Over 92% of the school districts report that they have driver shortages. The reason First Student is the most chosen transportation provider in North America, we have depth of experience that is unmatched. Francis Howell will need to acquire 185 buses. This represents $16 million in new capital. That is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Julie Corbett.
Good evening.
I'm a parent and professional. I set high expectations for myself and my children and expect the same from the board, teachers, and administrators who represent this community. Let it be known that I appreciate the teachers' services. I do support the Board of Education and administrators. There are positive changes happening and investments and initiatives such as Parents University, the CAPS program, and pathway courses that demonstrate the board's commitment to keeping our district at the top. The last tax campaign specifically stated raises for teachers, so when it failed, what could the teachers have expected? It is absurd to claim that a no vote means someone does not support our teachers. The community spoke for a third time, denying the request for a tax increase. A letter was distributed at my son's parent-teacher conference by the Francis Howell Education Association asking for parents to show their support for teachers. The letter was a grammar nightmare and quite confusing. Our teachers should be embarrassed to have leaders approving such a poorly written letter while seeking an increase in pay. I learned that some of the teachers were not satisfied with their salary and made a choice to work to their minimal contract. I attended a PTO meeting about work to contract on Tuesday night at Bryan Middle School. The president of the teachers union was there and I was stunned and disappointed that she was unable to give a single straightforward answer. She insulted the parents' and community's intelligence by assuming we would fall for the elusiveness and avoidance of answers. The few teachers that attended were overly emotional, and in that setting, it would have been more productive to bring solutions rather than raw feelings. The community is not opposed to the teachers working a contract, and parents are more than willing to volunteer when asked. The PTO awarded many grants to several teachers that took their time to complete the applications. Let's move forward. When I hear a problem, I expect to hear possible solutions, especially when the leaders are present. I asked the union president and the unsatisfied teachers numerous times during the PTO meeting what they would like me to say on their behalf when I address the board, and what are their proposed solutions. They were unable to identify specific solutions and asked me to come to the meeting and let it be known that I support the teachers. While I appreciate the teacher services, I support the board's decisions to be financially responsible rather than act on pure emotion. And I'm also grateful for a united board who is earning back the trust of the community with a forward-thinking, strategic, economical approach. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. FHEA? FESPA? SAA? Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mr. Lang. By roll call.
Mrs. Lang?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Next on our agenda, Board, I will entertain a motion to approve the 2019 summer school proposal as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Walker. Dr. Hogan.
Yes, good evening. Dr. Lammers and Dr. Garland are here tonight to speak to you about the summer school proposal, which is really not all that different from last year, so I'll let them speak to you about that.
Good evening, members of the board and executive cabinet. Dr. Lammers and I are here just to kind of give you an overview of the proposal for the 2019 summer school. I will be overseeing the elementary portion of the summer school programs, and Dr. Lammers will oversee the secondary. As you can see looking at this slide, basically all of the same programming is being offered with one addition. If you remember from last year, actually the last 2 years, Central Elementary was one of our Title schools, and we were able to fund through Title an enrichment program. Since then, we've added 2 additional schools that are also school-wide, which is Harvest Ridge and Henderson. And as you also know, we've received a cut in funding for our Title I programming. So this year we decided to offer to all of our elementary schools the option to offer an enrichment program. We have 2 of our schools, as you'll see later in the presentation, that are choosing to do that, and we will earn ADA for that. The proposed dates are June 3rd through June 23rd for most of the programs, with STEAM Camp extending through July. Extended school year, same dates as last year, starting June 3rd, ending June 20th. And then Dr. Lammers will go through some of the secondary programming. Sorry.
At the middle school level, we are proposing carrying over the same programs that we had last year. The middle school summer success program last year went from a 4-week session to a 6-week session. We made sure we surveyed the community and the parents and the staff on was 6 weeks too long. And the majority of the responses were in favor of it being 6 weeks. And when we looked at the data showing the gains that students achieved as a result of those extra 2 weeks of summer school, it was really not a difficult decision to continue going with the 6-week program. So the middle school summer success program will again be a 6-week program. We're going to offer the app camp, the STEAM summer enrichment program, and then the biomedical that you saw a couple months ago when some students came in and showed you the biomedical science camp. We're going to offer that as well. High school credit recovery, we're proposing to happen at Francis Howell High School, having the session 1 going from June 3rd to the 14th, session 2 concluding by the end of June 28th. Credit advancement will happen at the same campus at the same time with a morning session and an afternoon session. Our early warning system, so we have our students who coming in from 8th to 9th grade who have been identified as in need of some kind of a little bit of a head start, an early welcome into high school, so they can hit the ground running. Propose having that go during the last 2 weeks of June. Max Scholars Summer Institute happening at Francis Howell North and Francis Howell Central High School. We don't have the dates and times yet for those, but we ran it last year, plan on doing that again next year. And then the AP prep camps running in all 3 buildings again. As far as the budget for it, our projected revenue based on projected ADA is just under $1.5 million. Projected expenses, staffing carrying the lion's share of that at just over $1 million. Transportation, we're assuming, we're budgeting a slight increase from 282 last year, 282,000 to about 300, assuming some fuel charges, fuel increases in there, and the summer school being held at Francis Howell High School, not quite as central in the district, it might cost a little bit more, and with the addition of some enrichment programs at the elementary, boosting supplies by about $9,000. Projected that we should be in the black by about $18,000 for summer school. Our proposal is that this will take place at 8 campuses. The summer school program will happen at 8 campuses. So at Harvest Ridge Elementary we'll have 2 programs, Fairmount having 2 programs, both Central Elementary and Fairmount having the enrichment program as well, Sager having 3 programs, Howell Central and Howell North having the Max Scholar Summer Institutes and the AP prep camps happening there, and then at Francis Howell High School having the lion's share of the secondary programs, of the high school programs.
So let me just explain just a little bit further. So as you know, this year we doubled the size of our elementary success program, and we found that was very beneficial. Our STEAM camps are super popular, and every year we have a wait list, so we anticipate that will continue to be the trend this year. We will continue to offer the kindergarten summer success program as well, that our schools, principals, teachers, and parents all find extremely beneficial for our incoming kindergartners. And so our hope is that we will have that at all 10 buildings. Now the enrichment program, so let me just kind of explain. So how it was done previously, Central Elementary's librarian developed a program where she chose 6 days throughout the entire summer, and she hosted 3 kind of mini clubs. She did a book club, she did a makerspace club, and she did a coding club. And we did not collect ADA for that because Title did fund it. So when we learned this year that we were going to take a decrease in the funding, we offered to all the elementary schools, if you have staff interested in developing some sort of enrichment program, submit a proposal and we'll definitely entertain the idea. At this point we have 2 schools, Central who is planning to do the same program, and then Fairmount who is proposing, it's actually a 2-week program where she's going to, let me make sure I have this right. She's got coding, chess, teaching the kids to play chess, some makerspace, and then she's doing some STEM activities that directly tie to literature. So she's kind of tying all of it together into a 2-week program. It's possible that we may get a couple additional elementaries that send proposals, and at that point I will definitely keep you updated.
And then some specifics about the secondary programs. The Middle School Summer Success Program focuses primarily on reading and math intervention using the Read 180 and the Math 180 platforms. We've seen significant gains. The students last year in math saw almost a year's worth of gain within a 6-week time frame, and on the reading side getting almost about 70% of a year's worth of gains in that 6-week program. So we're excited about that opportunity for our students again. The middle school STEM and app camps, where you've got the students producing apps that they actually put out there for public consumption. The biomedical science camp, where the students they participate in solving a crime. They do some gel electrophoresis and things of that nature. That's usually led by students. It was led by students last year, and that's our hope to have that led by students with a staff sponsor along for the ride. That ninth grade early warning system where students are identified for, they're coming into high school at risk, so we provide them a bit of a head start into high school. The high school credit recovery, students who are in need of making up credits in order to advance toward graduation, but also some students who are trying to get a little bit ahead so they can make room in their schedule for some more electives, and it's frequently used for band. We're going to offer health and personal finance. I was wanting to say physical science. It's not the same thing, Luke. And then with the Max Scholars Summer Institute, we now have 2 buildings in the district that are running a Max Scholars program, and we had hoped to have some students from that group here tonight to talk about something different or talk about the program at a different point in the session, but. They spend a lot of time in the summer going to colleges in the area and kind of getting that on-campus feel for what it's going to be like for them when they're done with high school. And so they run that camp during the summer, that Summer Institute. And then the Advanced Placement Prep Camp for those kids who are taking that academic stretch by taking their first advanced placement class, giving them a little bit of a preview of what they're about to walk into that first AP class. And with that, we will entertain any questions that you may have.
Board, any questions? Ms. Walker?
You mentioned a waiting list and we're 18,000 in the black. Could we use that money to let in the rest of the kids?
I think it's something that we can look into. I think the challenge is the staffing piece of it, as well as the building usage, the number of classrooms that we need for summer school. We'll be, even though we're using one of our largest schools, we're still going to be stretched on ensuring that we are in and out of the space in time for them to prepare for the next school year as well. But it's definitely something that we can look into.
Mr. Lane?
I'll piggyback on that. And I'd also like to put a plug in for the kindergarten readiness. My granddaughter participated last summer and it was well worth her time. It was a great introduction to Cosley Elementary School. And I was, to be honest, disappointed that one of our elementary schools did not have it at all. So I'd like for you to work very hard to make sure that every elementary school has that kindergarten readiness program available for the parents and children. Thank you.
Thank you, we will do that.
Board, any other questions? Mr. Haynes?
I know that we've added some programs and, expanded it. Are we still being able to service the same number of students, or have we increased the number of students we can service overall, or where are we on numbers exactly?
We increased from 2017 to 2018 because we actually doubled the size of the elementary program. I will say with the enrichment program specifically, that will depend on each building. It really depends on how many staff that they have interested in participating. So Central, she has open enrollment, knowing that she has plenty of people that are willing to step up and be a part of the teaching and learning with the kiddos. At Fairmount, given that this is their first go at it, I think that they're going to cap their enrollment on how many kids can attend. I would imagine that if they have, I believe she's projecting for about 50 students right now to serve in the 2-week camp. My guess would be that as we see students enroll for that, if it's super popular, we will certainly go to the table and try to add additional staffing so that we can service all those kids.
Mr. Lane?
I just have a question. FHN and FHC both have the Max Scholar program. I got to attend the commitment ceremony at Francis Howell Central. I was just curious to see if that's open to maybe Howell students to attend one of the 2 sites to do, because the college visits would be good for any students.
I think that's a great suggestion. I'll certainly take that to the leaders at Central and North High. I know that Howell High is looking at the program. 2 years ago, Central began the program. North added in some last year, and it's something that's spreading to the 3 buildings. I know they're examining it, and it's a fantastic suggestion that I will share with Mr. Stover and Dr. Greer. Thank you.
right, before they try to walk away again. Any other questions? I have a comment. I am continued to be impressed by the variety and the opportunity that we offer in the summer school program. Just the full range of students that we can reach out to during that time. We know that if we continue the education through the time that they're off school and get them involved during the summer, how much more that puts them ahead for the next school year. So thank you for all your work on this. By roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Thank you for the presentation. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve replacing 6 part-time permanent substitute positions with 6 full-time permanent substitute positions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mr. Lang. Mrs. Simpkins.
Thank you. Tonight we are asking the board to consider this proposal as we continue to brainstorm and look at different ways that we can support our teachers, our buildings, and our students when we have teacher absences and struggle with filling those positions with a substitute teacher. This is something that we have been working on for the last several years. You'll see in the memo that was presented to the board all of the different steps and strategies that we have used to attack this nationwide problem with the shortage of substitute teachers. So earlier this year, you did approve for 6 permanent part-time substitutes, which means that 3 of them show up each day or communicate with our ASAP specialist, Karen Brady, and we hold them back until we see where the no-falls land. And then we start to send them out where we see the biggest need. And on those days where we have experienced 0 no-fills, those big celebration days, it's because those substitutes were available, those permanent substitutes were available, and maybe even more than the 3 were working. We maybe sent out 4 of them. So we feel like even with that, we continue to see these no-fills. And one of those strategies, one of the things we're asking is that we can have 6 full-time permanent substitutes. So increasing that 6 of them will be available each day, so we can send them out to support the district and relieve some of that organizational stress that our buildings are facing. So be happy to answer any questions that you have about what that would look like.
Great, thank you. Mr. Lane.
Will you expect them to fill long-term subs, or would they be more of the short-term, 1, 2, 3 day positions?
We will not use them for long-term positions. They will report to Karen Brady in the morning, each morning, and then go to where those no-fills are. So if we have a long-term position that's posted, they may be used in the interim until we find a long-term substitute. But really, we're going to hold them back and reserve them so that we can send them out where we see those needs each morning.
Thank you.
Board, any other questions? Thank you, Mrs. Simpkins.
Thank you.
By roll call.
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to reject all 3 proposals for student transportation services and begin the process of converting to an in-house operation.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mrs. Lang. Mr. Supple.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. As the board knows, we've been in conversation for many months about our transportation services. The board encouraged us to do a study of our services, and you've heard reference to that study this evening by our public comments, patron comments. And we did find that that the current system was operating within a standard parameters. But we got direction from the board that it was time to take a comprehensive look and to determine what the marketplace was going to tell us about the services that we were providing. So earlier this fall, we issued a request for proposals. We did have a pre-proposal meeting. A number of firms attended that meeting and expressed interest. Ultimately, 3 firms submitted a proposal. And when we looked at the financial aspects of the proposals, just taking the financial aspects, they range from a low of an overall 6% increase to a high of a 23% increase to our current cost for providing transportation services. Concurrent with the RFP process, Dr. Hendricks Harris and I had conversations with districts who had recently transitioned to in-house operations so that we could fully understand the options that would be available to us. And this was, of course, well before we got any of the proposals back. We were concerned that given the age of our current fleet, the increases for the new contract would be significantly greater than what we were currently spending. And that certainly is reflected in the highest of the bids with an almost 23% increase. And of course, a lot of that is driven by the cost for the equipment. Providing 185 new buses is a significant undertaking. So, as we considered the proposals and understanding that there was a number of concerns have been expressed to us this year by parents, by principals, about the level of service that we were able to deliver for our students. We considered more strongly the option to bring services in-house. I will tell you that we've had some very frank conversations about the level of work that is going to be required in order to execute this strategy. We have a proposal that provides some outline of details of what might be involved. And again, I think you heard some of the speakers tonight mention some of the work that would be involved in this process. So I want you to know we, even before we received the letter from First Student this afternoon, we've had those conversations. So I think we have an understanding. I've shared with the board previously, but I do want to say it again this evening. Our decision is not going to mean that things are going to operate flawlessly. There certainly exists a possibility that in the initial startup of the new school year, we could experience greater service issues than what we've seen in the past. But we would not be making the recommendation if we didn't believe that we had the wherewithal in order to provide a greater level of service for our students and our parents. The other point that I think is important to make, we are not bringing this proposal to the board as a cost savings measure. We've had conversations with the board over a number of years, particularly when the focus has been on budget reductions, that we needed to look at our transportation services first because that was where that's the next largest line item outside of salaries and benefits. We certainly anticipate that if you view this as a long-term commitment, which I believe in making a decision, acting on the administration's recommendation tonight, this isn't like buying a commodity that this year we're going to buy from company A and next year we're going to buy from company B. This would be a long-term commitment to the district insourcing its transportation services. And I do believe that over the long term, we will be able to flatten the curve in terms of the cost acceleration for providing transportation services. But there will be a lot of startup costs that will be associated with this program. The information that you received in a letter from First Student today is exactly correct. I'm certain that there are at least 10 RFPs that we're going to have to do. We are very fortunate to have the ability to work with an individual who's recently been through this process, who can provide us some guidance as to what needs to be done. But there will be a lot of work to be done. Our goal is to be operational July 1 of 2019. So that's why we planned specifically the timeline for having the RFP responses finalized by this date in November to give us as much time as possible if there were any possibility that we would be thinking about either transitioning to in-house services or changing vendors. If we were to change vendors, a similar level of work would be required. I am glad to tell you that I had a conversation today with Paul Osland, the Chief Operating Officer for First Student, called me today, certainly to express his disappointment with our recommendation, to encourage me to think creatively, and some of the concepts that he shared with me were included in the letter that was sent to the board today. But I was also very glad to hear that he said First Student is a professional organization, and while they don't believe or support that this is the best idea for us, they will act professionally and help us ensure a smooth transition. And that commitment from the highest levels of the organization was a good reassurance to me, and I was very glad that he shared that information with me. You also had an opportunity this evening to hear from a number of the staff who work for First Student. We know how important they are. I've often told our drivers when I've had the opportunity to do so that you're the first people our kids see and the last ones they see before they go home. And you can help them have a good day, and you can help them be ready for learning. They are a critical, important piece to the work that we do. And we certainly want to reassert our commitment and let them know that we hope that there will be every opportunity to work with them as we move forward. They are very important to us. All of the employees are important to us. And this change in management shouldn't let them, we don't want them to feel that there's any less of a commitment to the great work that they do for our kids, that we recognize every day that they help us educate our kids, because they help make sure they come to school ready to learn, get to school on time. So Mary and I have a plan to meet with any of the drivers who are available on Monday in a group setting. I had an opportunity to meet with Steve Jones and Amy Sides earlier this week, and we expressed a desire at that time to have a chance to personally convey to them what our decision was and to help answer any questions that they might have to the best of our ability, and to help them understand how much we value them. So we'll be making ourselves available after the morning routes on Monday to have an opportunity to talk to any of the drivers who might be available. We're not going to ask that there be a mandatory meeting, but we certainly would like to make ourselves available. Just a way to demonstrate our commitment to the process and how important they are to our overall success. With that, I think that the information that was provided to the board answers a number of the questions that you might have, but there are some, probably some other questions that we haven't had a chance to address yet, and I'd be happy to answer those now.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Supple. Mr. Lane?
Must be going night. This might be to Lisa. One of my worries is people. Lisa and Kevin, will the First Student staff have a priority as far as applying to work for Francis House School District?
Our plan would be to hold a job fair and go through a hiring process, absolutely, and give all of those current employees of First Student an opportunity to apply and meet with us and go through that process with us. So we know that they are very valuable people and that they have the experience and the knowledge of our district and of our kiddos and some of our processes. So I would see that they would be a priority in that hiring process.
So the job fair would be for the community, not for the present staff?
We haven't made that decision yet. We could probably hold a job fair that would be specific to current First Student employees first, and then fill in any gaps that we would need to after that. But that would give them an opportunity to come in and meet with us first. So we still have some work to do in that planning and what that timeline looks like. We haven't had all of those conversations, but I could see that being definitely a possibility.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Hain?
Yeah, I know that Francis Howell, we're always trying to be first on most things that we do, and this is one of the instances where I believe that we're the last holdout of the districts in St. Charles County. I believe all the other districts in St. Charles County have in-house their busing previously, and so we're the last instead of the first, but it is what it is, and I hope everything works out well. I know it's an aggressive timeline, but I have confidence in our superintendent and our entire staff for getting this pulled off in the timeframe that they said they can do it.
Ms. Stiglich?
Yeah, this is going to be a really hard decision for me to make tonight. I have worked with First Student on many occasions as a nurse coordinator in this district. I know how hard these people work. I know how hard it is for change. Somebody told me a long time ago, all change is loss. And I think that's one of the things that we have to remember. Mr. Supple and Ms. Simpkins, I would really look for you to look to these people to make sure that they are on, that every opportunity is given for them to be part of this. Because I do believe that every single one of those people in that room sitting in there staring at us believes in our kids and wants to do what's best for our kids.
Board, any other questions or comments?
Ms. Stiglich, could I just address that for a moment?
Absolutely.
One of the things that we learned when we were interviewing districts that brought it in-house was how much more of the district community the drivers felt as a part of in-housing the service. So we look forward to making our bus drivers our employees and having them be Francis Hall employees in every sense of the word. And we believe that to be one of the advantages of bringing it in-house.
Thank you.
So I have been vocal about opposing this for quite some time, and I just want to talk about, I believe we're in the business of education, not transportation. However, I am very confident in the robust research that has been done to bring this to fruition, even as I was a naysayer as we set out. So there's been a lot of time invested in this research to make sure that it can happen and it can happen well for our students and our staff. And I do look forward, as Dr. Hendricks-Harris mentioned, expanding our HAL family. Board, any other comments? By roll call.
Ms. Stiglich? It's with a very heavy heart, I vote aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, we have a second motion in this area. I would entertain a motion to revise the 2018-19 staffing plan by adding a Director of Transportation position.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mr. Hayne. Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. Again, as we think about the transition process, the most important thing will be to have a strong guiding hand. And so our first order of business would be to find a Director of Transportation who would help to manage the process. And while we certainly will, Mrs. Simpkins and I will be very much involved, we do think that we need someone to help shepherd all of the pieces that are involved. I mentioned that this is only the first step in some changes that we will need to make in order to accommodate this new initiative within the Francis Howell School District. Having an additional 200 plus employees means that we will need to have some additional human resources support, some additional payroll support, and most likely some additional benefit support. And what the exact configuration of that might look like, we're not ready to present that to you this evening, but you can anticipate that in very short order there would be a request coming to you for some additional staffing. We want to make sure that people have an opportunity to be adequately trained on our systems so that they can be proficient right from the get-go, so that as we onboard the new employees, one of the hiccups won't be people having to learn how to use our financial or payroll systems in order to make sure that they're fully integrated into our electronic databases. So, as I said, Director of Transportation is first and very critical, but there certainly will be other positions even prior to getting the bulk of the staffing hired in order to make sure that we're equipped for what's going to come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Supple. Board, any questions on that? Okay, I look forward to hearing those next steps by roll call.
Mr. Hayne?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, next on our agenda, under fiscal responsibility, I would entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2019 revised budget as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lane, seconded by Mrs. Stiglich. Mr. Supple.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I think is important for us to talk about. One would be, as a follow-up to a conversation that we had a little earlier this evening, the summer school ADA plays an important role for us, and we noted in the memo that summer school ADA for last summer was higher than we had anticipated, which is great news, and ended up being a very positive thing for us as our overall enrollment is declining a little bit. That summer school ADA helps to soften the blow a little bit as we move forward. So kudos to our academic team for leading, and our teachers for leading a great summer program that a lot of kids want to participate in. It's a good thing for the district in many, many ways, including the additional ADA that it brings to us. You also heard mention of a change in our Title I funding. As noted in the memo, there's been a revision of the definition of our census poverty, and that's the basis upon which Title I funding is distributed. And so we have a reduction of around $700,000 in Title I funding. So we are adjusting to that, and that change is reflected in our budget. On the positive side, I noted that the Federal Reserve has seen appropriate to increase short-term interest rates, and that's had a positive effect for us. We anticipate that there will be additional rate increases during this fiscal year, and we have adjusted our interest income accordingly. Just as a side note, when I came to the district in 2005, we would typically earn somewhere around $2 million a year in interest income, which is great because you really don't have to do anything. You just have the bank send you a check every month. So we're glad to see that interest rates are coming back up. That is a positive. Also, I noted that we were pleasantly surprised that the number of transfer students who continue to participate in the program is much higher than we anticipated. You can recall that we had a lot of interest in the program, but we knew that transportation would not be provided, and we thought that would be a significant hindrance to people making the journey from Normandy to Francis Howell. But we had 63 students, and so we have increased our projected revenue from the transfer student tuition by about $330,000. So those are some positive things. Overall, there's a relatively minor shift in our total revenue, some pluses and minuses, but those are the highlights from our revenue. On the expenditure side, a couple things that I would note. The legislature did approve a law that requires us to provide a much more robust online educational offerings, and we have been providing some of those for our students, but we're looking at doing something a little bit more robust. So there's an increase in our budget that's associated with implementation of that law. I mention it not so much because it's a big dollar amount or the topic itself, but I think it's good to know that there are financial impacts to local school districts from decisions that are made in Jefferson City that don't necessarily have funding attached to them for their implementation. So we are making those adjustments. This is just one example of an area where there was no new stream of revenue associated with this, but something that we have to implement. We also have some tech improvements that we continue to make as we try to come back from a 2-year hiatus of not purchasing new technology. So that process is underway. There's some additional expenditures for that as well. In the bond fund, a couple things that I would note. We did include funding for the master planning that was approved by the board earlier this year. You had an opportunity at our last meeting to hear some information from our architects about that program, what the final outcome is going to look like. We're very excited about that work, but the funding for that is included in this revised budget. And, we've been doing a lot of work to improve the physical climate at Francis Howell North, and the funding for the new chiller is included in this budget as well. That work is already underway, that work's been done, but the funding is included here. Which really brings me to another point that I wanted to make about the revised budget. This is not a forecast of how we're going to end the fiscal year. This is not a forecast of how we're going to end the fiscal year. This is not a forecast of how we're going to end the fiscal year. This is an opportunity for us to incorporate those items that were not known to us at the time that the preliminary budget was being adopted. So we didn't have information yet about the change in our Title I funding. We couldn't anticipate the number of transfer students who were actually going to attend. We had conversations about master planning that came after the preliminary budget conversations were begun. The purpose of this document is to incorporate those major changes, including things like what the actual tax rate was that we set. So there aren't significant differences from what was adopted in June from the preliminary budget, but again, that's not the purpose of this document. In the debt service fund, I will say that we noted in there about the refunding of bonds, and earlier this week the board met and approved our moving forward with that. We sold the bonds on Wednesday, and I got information that we did a little bit better than we had anticipated, so we achieved $105,000 in savings as a result of that effort, so very glad to do that. I want to take this opportunity to just lay the groundwork for some things that are coming up. So this is not about this revised budget, but some budgetary items that I want to just make sure are on the board's radar because they're certainly on mine. We are going to be needing to incorporate funding for our high schools to replace their band uniforms. That is a significant undertaking. It doesn't happen very often. We usually operate on about a 10-year cycle. But Francis Howell High School, both because of the age of their uniforms and because of the growth in their program, need to replace their uniforms. And that will be something that we'll include in the 2019 and 20 budget in order to make sure that those are available for the kids as they begin their 2019-20 school year. The actual ordering of those will probably begin earlier in the early spring. So you'll see that. It's not incorporated in this budget because our intention is to pay for it out of next year. But that's about a $100,000 expenditure, and we will get the high schools on a cycle of doing that so that it may not be a cycle where a high school does it in consecutive years, but in the next several years, the other two high schools as well will need to be replacing their band uniforms. And those are, it's a fairly big dollar amount associated with that, so I just want to have that on your radar. Also, Mr. Wilson has been doing a study about our financial and payroll software. We have, the current system's been in place for about 12 years, and we continue to struggle with some issues, and so we're taking a look at that. Again, that's not something that's in the revised budget. It's not necessarily something that will be in 2019 and 20, but it is a $5,750,000 expenditure at the time that we do that, and it is a very critical piece to what we do in terms of keeping us able to pay people on time and get people hired and comply with all of the rules and regulations. So again, something that needs to be on the radar. And then finally, there's work underway currently within the academic department to take a look at a learning management system. We've been having that conversation for a number of years. I believe that we're going to be able to have some great information to share with the board, but again, that's a fairly significant expenditure and it's not included in the revised budget, but just want to have it on your radar that that is something that we're thinking about as we move forward. So several big ticket items are coming up, part of our normal course of business, things that we have to be thinking about.
Sorry, I was continuing to take a couple notes there. Board, any questions for Mr. Supple, either on the current fiscal year 2019 revised budget or the other big ticket items that he's brought forward for awareness? Thank you very much for that information, Mr. Supple. It's good to put those big ticket items in the back of our head, know that they're coming down the pipe, so thank you for that. By roll call.
Ms. Walker?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the October 2018 monthly financial report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Walker. Board, any questions? Okay. By roll call?
Ms. Lang?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 7-0. Board, I'll entertain a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lang, seconded by Mrs. Walker. Board, any questions? By roll call?
Mr. Lane?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Next on our agenda is an update on our strategic planning committees. As you know, we had a few committees present last month, or last board meeting. And this meeting, we are going to start with goal 3. Mrs. Simpkins.
Thank you. Goal 3 is staff leaders and organizational performance, and our goal is to attract, develop, and retain highly qualified employees to continuously improve student, school, and district performance. And we do have 2 strategies, improving employee development, leadership, and total reward systems, and enhancing collaboration and teamwork to support innovation, risk-taking, and continued improvement. Dr. Connie Buckman is the champion in this goal, along with myself. And we have our standing committee as well as our advisory committee. We have met a couple of times, once with our standing and once with our advisory. Unfortunately, we did have to cancel our second standing committee Monday evening because of the impending weather. So we have rescheduled that meeting to December 10th, and we'll spend 2 hours with our standing committee in the month of December to catch up on our agenda. Some celebrations that we have had in our group. We have received positive feedback from both our standing and our advisory committees about the process that we're using and the pacing of the work that we're doing. And I would say from our standpoint as goal champions, the input and the conversation has been extremely valuable and helpful from all of our stakeholders. We have great experts on our standing committee that have given us some great ideas and some things to think through. Then at our January advisory meeting, the committee will discuss some potential KPIs for our strategy. So we have not got to that step yet. Those key performance indicators, we are still working through developing some of the action steps with those committees to be sure we know the direction we need to go before we put the measures in place. Potential action steps so far for strategy 1. We've kind of worked with our committees to create some buckets of ideas that we could push this strategy forward with. Those include information gathering, which would just be research, just finding out what our staff feels is lacking in our rewards package, what other districts are doing to enhance employee development or leadership or reward systems. So just researching with some benchmark districts. We'll also be looking at leadership opportunities. So while we have some systems in place to create opportunities for our teachers to become administrators, what leadership opportunities do we have for teachers who want to stay within that role but be leaders in their building, and how do we develop that? Or how do we develop our support staff employees who might look for some leadership opportunities? Also looking at some recognition ideas, how to best promote some of the great thing our staff is doing. Looking at work-life integration, some of those convenience services maybe that we can put into place, or how do we give back some time in the day so that our employees can plan and do their work. We're looking at professional learning, and then of course reward systems and recruiting structures as well, so some of those grow your own plans. Strategy 2, the meeting that we were to have Monday, that's where we were going to start developing some of those potential buckets and action steps. So we look forward to doing that on December 10th with our committee. And then we will take all of that information back to our advisory in January. We'll prioritize those action steps. What do they think is the most important thing for us to start with as an advisory group? And then we'll start to develop those action teams and develop those KPIs. So as we get into second semester, we'll have some roads that we can start traveling down as to meet those goals that we have in Goal 3. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Board, any questions on Goal 3? Great, thank you. Next, we have Goal 4. Mr. Dykeman.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. Goal 4 is engaged. It was the eye contact. Goal 4 is engaged family and community partnerships, and I have the great pleasure and responsibility of leading that out with Dr. Chris Garland. We've had 3 meetings to date, 2 of our standing and 1 of our advisory. We're very excited about the spectrum of talent on our standing committee. So we have a couple of very engaged parents. We have a principal, we have a school counselor, we have a teacher, we have the executive director of the community council, we have the community relations director of the St. Charles County Ambulance District, we have the executive director of the Cottleville Weldon Spring Chamber of Commerce, so a really great wealth of information of people of expertise to pull on. And our board representative is Michelle Walker and alternate Mary Line. We have talked at great length about some potential action steps, but we also framed it around a conversation about what things are we already doing in the district, what initiatives, what programs, and what areas do they fall under. So as we've talked about action steps, we've done a variety of exercises, including a gallery walk, so we could look at what we're doing and we could brainstorm around some action steps that perhaps we aren't doing yet. We did a green and red dot. What are your priorities? What do you think is not a priority for the district exercise? We brought that to our advisory committee. They were able to provide some input. And then we met again last week and we worked on refining and defining some of the items that people had added. So we talked about what exactly do you mean by that? What do you think that should look like? We're working on KPIs, so we've charged our committee with thinking about, as we identify these action steps, what key performance indicators can we use to measure our success. And we talk about, of course, in academics all the time, about formative versus summative assessments. So we need to have a way to measure the end success of a project or initiative, but we also need to be able to show progress along the way. The other thing we're doing is tomorrow, actually, we're sending out a survey link to our standing committee, and they will be able to take all of the items that we refined and defined, and they, that is individuals, we have the opportunity to prioritize in their own personal opinion which items that they think are most important. One of the things that we've talked about at great length are the district websites and the way our parents access that information. I shared with the committee that at the beginning of the year, I created with Dr. Vanderpool for the SPED department a SPED family app. For a variety of reasons, that app hasn't gotten the traction with the SPED group as much as we would liked, and I talked to Dr. Vanderpool about it. And I also talked to the committee, and there is potential to make that not just a SPED app, but enlarge that and make that a mobile parent app. So it would be accessible for all of our parents in the district, and it would be a much easier way to access all of the digital content on the website. The committee has charged me, an action team of 1, with looking into that. I've already had some preliminary conversations with School Messenger, our vendor, and they have told me that they will allow the district to repurpose that at no additional charge. So still have a lot of work to do to bring that to fruition, but that's as we try to identify some low-hanging fruit, some easy successes that align very closely with the strategic plan. We think that that's certainly one of those things. So looking forward to sending out the survey link tomorrow and getting back some more priority feedback from our standing committee on additional action steps.
Great, thank you. Board, any questions for Mr. Dykeman? Mrs. Lang.
It's not really a question, it's a comment. I was at a PTO meeting last night, and a parent approached me and said that was one of the best meetings she has ever attended. She was very complimentary towards the productiveness of it, the progress the group is making, and just went on and on.
So the great thing about education, as opposed to perhaps business, is the collaborative as opposed to competitive nature of what we do. We have gone to great lengths as an executive cabinet, as a full cabinet, and as goal leaders to work together collaboratively to say what's the best way to do this as a process, where's your group, where's our group. There's been a lot of best practice sharing ideas. Unfortunately, Lisa Simpkins has stolen Connie Buckman away.
I won the lottery.
And of course, Dr. Buckman is excellent with processes for feedback and facilitating meetings, so we've all had the opportunity to pick her brain as well and employ some of the strategies that she uses. So we have strategically and intentionally spent a lot of time preparing for these meetings. We know that it's important for our stakeholders. We know that the strategic plan obviously is important for our district. So we are going to take the time and invest the resources necessary to make sure that these meetings are important and well-run and provide the information and feedback we need. But thank you for that, yes.
Good to hear.
It was great. She went on and on, the whole PTO.
I think I know the parent you're speaking of.
Yep.
She's a very engaged parent.
She is, and it was very, very.
And she looks at the district with a critical eye.
She does.
And an objective eye. So it's.
It was great.
I don't mean. I mean critical in the sense that she's
usually
very
here tonight.
objective. Yes, she's very objective and.
It was great.
And looks at things.
Congrats. I mean,
yes, is able to look at
the
things.
progress is amazing.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Dykman? Thank you very much. All right, we also have our Goal 5 strategy.
Mr. Supple.
Mr. Supple, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope. I am a co-leader of this with Matt Gober, our new Director of Facilities. So he had an opportunity to attend our last meeting. We've had Goal 5 is resource effectiveness and efficiencies. We've met as a standing committee twice, and our advisory committee has met once. We have focused on our first goal, which is ensuring that our facilities are safe, secure, well-maintained, equitable, and meet the needs of 21st century teaching and learning. At our first standing committee meeting, we brainstormed around that first goal and came up with ideas in a number of categories: safety, new construction and improvements, maintenance, communication, and then there was an other category that wasn't easily identified. We spent some time then with the advisory committee and had some great conversation about the brainstorming that the standing committee had done. And it was clear from that that our initial focus needed to be on school safety. And so as the standing committee met again in November, we took that feedback from the advisory and began to fine-tune our thoughts around school safety. And we now have a draft of 2 action steps. One will be around the concept of world-class in terms of school safety, what that is, and what the gap is between that ideal and where we are today. And so that will probably be one of our first action steps. And so the committee meets, the standing committee meets again in December, and we will further refine that concept. And then the advisory committee will have an opportunity to provide some feedback to us. We don't meet with them again until February, so hopefully by then we will have some progress made on one or more action steps, and we're very much looking forward to that. But as others have indicated, a great group of people, very dedicated, interested in the community and its success, and very willing to give of their time and talent to help move this concept forward.
Great, thank you, Mr. Supple. Mr. Hain?
Yeah, this is just kind of a general comment for all of these standing committees. It's, you know, we're getting updates on these as we go along. There's a lot of work being done, and this isn't something that's going to happen over 2 months or 3 months. This is something that we hope to have finished by the end of this year. And so therefore, a lot of this stuff is just kind of like, oh, we're looking at this, and we're looking at that, we're looking at that. But this is all part of our strategic plan to come to a final plan, and all this will come together at the end of the year, right? I'm assuming it's all going to come together at the end of the year, and then we'll have our plan moving forward. And at that point, it'll have budgeting, staffing, and everything else that goes along with that, and then we'll be able to move the district in a positive direction.
Maybe. We've been having some conversations regarding pacing and timing. We don't want to push the committee and the input part along too quickly. So we believe right now we're going at the right pace. So if you're talking about the end of the year as in December 31st, I'm not sure we're going to hit that
End of school
goal.
year.
But by the end of the school year, we do believe we will be able to have our action plans outlined and identify next steps in each of the goal areas.
Mr. Lane?
I'm just going to piggyback a little on what Mike said. Mike and myself attended the advisory committee, and the only thing I have to say, it's a little bit hard to get used to that setup compared to our old, where we're basically just there and giving input and stuff, but it's more just listen to what's going on, and it's just a little bit different, so I know it'll work out in the end, and he can attest to that, because we had some good conversation about it, getting used to it though.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that it's all still new, right? So change is hard, whether it's for the committees and the leaders of the committees or for us attending. I believe strongly in the principles of forming, storming, and norming. You have a group come together, you form, you have all your niceties, then you storm a little bit. Where are we at? What do we have to do? Where are we going? And then you norm. And so I think we've already formed, we're starting to storm, and by the end of the year, I think we're gonna be norm, and I'm very excited about that. Big proponent, but know that there's a lot of work going on before the advisory committee see it, so I do appreciate that.
I would just add that we have to be patient. So if we're going to seek input, real input from those on our standing and our advisory committees, it's a slower process than us whipping up the action steps. We could get that for you tomorrow, but we really do want to work with those experts in the fields and put time and energy into identifying not only KPIs and action steps, but focusing even more on the priorities that have been given to us from the strategic plan. So I'll tell you, the gold champions are a little nervous about the timelines overall, but it is our goal to get some more concrete plans in place by the end of the year.
Great, thank you very much. Anything else on strategic planning at this time? Okay, next on our agenda is our policies. So we have our first reading of several policies there, board. So make sure you are taking a look at those. And superintendent comments.
Okay, just a few things. Since we last met, we've had many great community engagement events, Brownies with the Board, Parent University, PTO Booster Roundtable, Senior Pals, and Iron Chef. And just last night, our Parent Speaker Series on dyslexia. I don't know if you saw any of those tweets, but for our snowy night, we had a great turnout. There were many great Veterans Day events at our district schools, both last week and this week. Veterans Day is a great tradition in Francis Hall, and by my estimation, we celebrated about 1,000 vets across the district. More than 400 children in Francis Hall will be warm this winter thanks to the efforts of the Cottleville Firefighters Outreach. Students at elementary schools across the district recently received brand new coats as part of Operation Warm, a nonprofit focused on ensuring kids have a winter coat. The Thanksgiving luncheon at Francis Hall Union High School is different from many other Thanksgiving celebrations at Francis Hall. The annual event brings together students, staff, administrators, family, and board members to enjoy a meal as one giant family. The National Network of Partnership Schools at Johns Hopkins University recognizes schools and their communities that team up to use a research-based approach and sustain excellent programs of family and community involvement. This year, 5 different Francis Hall School programs have been recognized as promising practices. Our schools that received recognition were Francis Hall North, Francis Hall Middle, Cosley, Harvest Ridge, and Independence. The Missouri School Public Relations Association Communications Award Program annually provides members the opportunity to have their work evaluated by PR professionals and measure it against industry standards. For the 2018 MOSPRA Communication Awards Program, the Francis Hall Communications Department received 4 different awards, including recognition for video, website, strategic planning, and writing. Francis Hall has a new state champion. Last week, Francis Hall North freshman Logan Shelfault won the Class 2 1-meter diving competition at the St. Peter's Recplex. He also compiled a record 503.55 points on his way to the title, setting the bar, or in this case, the board, very high for the rest of his high school career.
I think that he did. A little Dykeman humor in there, I heard. Yeah. Okay. At this time, we have our Board of Education comments. Any comments this evening? Mr. Hain?
Yeah, I know that our superintendent, Mary Hendrick Harris, touched on it, but I just want to point out that a number of our board members and that were able to attended a large number of the Veterans Day events. And yeah, every one of them was unique, every one of them was different, but it just showed the community, and I talked to many of the veterans there, and I would say it was more like 2,000 instead of 1,000. A lot of them were going to 2 or 3 events because they had grandkids or kids at multiple schools. But every single veteran was very, very appreciative. Mostly the Vietnam veterans who said that they've been hearing thank you from the kids, thank you from the community on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. And it took them 20 to 30 years to get their first thank you. So I think we're doing a great job of bringing our kids up to appreciate all the sacrifices that our veterans did. And I just want to make sure that, you know, we continue that. I know it gets bigger and better every year at all the schools. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of what we were doing for our veterans, and to say my thanks to our veterans for all the service and sacrifice that they did.
We keep growing the celebrations, you're gonna have a budget for superintendent Kleenexes.
Any other board comments this evening? Okay. I would like to recognize our board for a minute. I just really appreciate the amount of time that this board puts in attending various events across the district. We could attend something, I think, every night. And I am continually impressed with the dedication that each of the individuals up here have in attending and being active in the schools. So I do appreciate that. There's a lot of work that goes into putting those events on, and I'm always excited when I get to go see some of the fruit of that work. All right, any Board of Education requests? Anything to bring forward to the team right now? We'll take a look at our December 20th meeting. Do we have any additions or corrections at this time? I'd like to request that it's not a snow day.
Me too.
All right, anything on the 20th?
Lisa, do we begin staffing at that point in December?
We do, we'll have a staffing workshop for the 19. In December, there will be a 1920 staffing workshop. So we'll bring the ideas to you in December, just to have some conversation, and then we bring it back in January for a vote.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll also have some very robust recognition as we carry over some things that were originally scheduled for tonight.
Very nice. Okay. All right, let's take a look at our January 17th meeting. Any known additions or corrections at this time? Dr. Hogan.
We'll send you some more details in board update, but APR and MAP have been delayed again. So as opposed to a mid-December public reveal, it's going to be a February 1st is what they're saying right now. We will have our data ahead of that time and be able to analyze it and draw some conclusions, but our ability to give you the full workshop won't be until February board meeting.
Okay, thank you for that update. Do we have another work session in mind at this time? No? Okay. We would have that slot open if it does arise. All right, with that, board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Walker, seconded by Mrs. Lang. By roll call.
Mr. Lang?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much.